Hey, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve on Saturday, April 10th, 2021. I'm Steve. And if you are here joining us live, I want to welcome you and join in the conversation. Just make a comment, say hello, let us know that you're here this morning. And if you are tuning in later and watching this recorded, make sure that you also participate, get in on it. You can make comments later on as well. And Corey Ann, there you are. Hi, everyone. Corey Ann says, good to see you. I was just looking. You're the first one that I'm seeing pop up on here, Corey Ann. So I just wanted to make sure that we were actually available and people were going to tune in live. There's Brenda. Good morning, Brenda. Good morning, Rick. Good morning, Carol. Okay, we're starting to see some people show up. Hi, Kirsten. Good to see you as well. Jay, we're here. I assume when you say we're here, Jay, that means both you and Jerry are watching. So welcome, Jay and Jerry. And once again, it is Saturday, April 10th, 2021. If you're watching live, it's 9:31 a.m. Pacific time, and whatever the equivalent is wherever you're at. So let's see, Jerry's coming. Okay, very good. Well, let me share some special days that are going on this week very quickly here. I want to get into our topic. So today, hi, Kathy. Kathy Garlick is on. Today, April 10th, is National Farm Animals Day. It is like Romper Room, Corey Ann. Today is National Farm Animals Day, so this is a day to celebrate your cows or your pigs or your horses or chickens, ducks, whatever you happen to have that's a farm animal. I guess we're just supposed to appreciate the farm animals in some fashion today, so do that. If you happen to have farm animals or live somewhere near farm animals, go out and say hello to them today and wish them a happy National Farm Animals Day. Today is also National Siblings Day. And that's the day that we acknowledge our national siblings. I don't think this includes international siblings. So if you have siblings that live in another country, apparently you can't acknowledge them today, just the national ones. But anyway, I know some of my siblings are on here right now. Carla is on here, Carla Glavin Venturi. Moo, Kirsten says, several of you say Moo, that's wonderful. But Kathy Garlick and Carla Venturi both on here are siblings of mine. I don't see Scott on here yet, but he may just be busy, my other sibling. But happy National Siblings Day to both of you, since you are both living in the nation. April 12th is Grilled Cheese Sandwich Day. Grilled cheese sandwich, that's you talk about Americana and something that's comfort food for many people, grilled cheese sandwiches. But there are different opinions about how exactly you prepare a grilled cheese sandwich, right? Do you pre-toast the bread? Do you grill the bread and then put the cheese on? Do you use butter? Some people use mayonnaise instead of butter on the bread when they're grilling it. What kind of cheese do you use on the inside? And do you put anything else on the inside with the cheese? That grilled cheese sandwich day brings up all kinds of interesting conversations in and of itself. Carla, did I say hi to you? I acknowledged you, but I don't know if I said hi to you yet. Rick, hello. Just making sure I'm saying hi to people, and I've probably said hi to some people more than once, but I don't want to miss anyone. Also on April 12th, Ramadan begins at sundown. Now, Ramadan is an Islamic holiday. Ramadan is actually the 9th month in the Islamic calendar, if you didn't know that, if you didn't know where the name comes from. And so at sundown on the 12th this year, and it varies because the Islamic calendar does not correspond 100% with our calendar. But this year it begins on April 12th at sundown, and it's the entire month. And people who celebrate this, who acknowledge this, use this as a month of fasting and spiritual growth. And so what you will see a lot of people who celebrate Ramadan doing is they will fast throughout the day and over the course of the month, and use that time for meditation, for prayer, and for other things. But so that begins on April 12th and goes for a month. And then also April 12th, this day in history, April 12th, 1912, was the Titanic sank. Um, supposedly unsinkable, right? Sailed out of Southampton a couple of days previous to this and then hit an iceberg and went down. That was on April 12th in 1912. 4/13, April 13th, National Peach Cobbler Day. Brenda, I know you love to bake. Are you planning on making, is anyone planning on making peach cobbler this week for the 13th, National Peach Cobbler Day? If so, let me know. If you would like to invite me over for some peach cobbler, I'm up for that. April 14th, this day in history, in 1865 was when President Abraham Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth. Anybody remember the name of the play that he was seeing when that happened? I've actually taken the tour of Ford's Theater, and it's an interesting tour. I only did it during one visit. I visited Washington, D.C. a few times, but only gone to Ford's Theater one time. And it's a very interesting tour, and it's very interesting because you do get to actually sit in the upper gallery area, and you get to look into the box that was the presidential box, which is now never used. That is permanently cordoned off as a memorial. But did you know that they actually, and Corianne, you're correct, our American cousin, I think is the maybe more correct there, Jay, was the play. And Ford's Theater is still actually used as a performance venue. I'm probably not right now because of COVID, but it typically they put on plays, they put on concerts, they put on different performances there. It's still used as a theater. They didn't just shut it down and turn it into a museum, although there are portions of it that are used as a museum, and they do the tours, etc. And then April 15th is tax day, except both last year and this year, because of COVID, the IRS has been nice enough to provide some extensions. This year, I believe we have a 1-month extension from the IRS to do our taxes. Jay, I know you're retired, but you're an accountant, right? Can you confirm that? Just looking for some expert confirmation on that. And then I do want to acknowledge one birthday today. I know I don't see Scott or Kathy Glavin on here. But Aaron Glavin, their son, is celebrating a birthday on April 14th. So happy birthday, Aaron. If you watch this later, if anyone in your family watches this later and wants to pass that along to you, I want to wish you a happy birthday. Listen, if you have a special day that I missed, you have a special day coming up this week that you want to put in the chat so that we can celebrate it with you, please do that. If you have a special day coming up in the remainder of the month of April, private message me so that we can make sure that we acknowledge that on Coffee Breaks with Steve. Thank you. 5/17/21. So we have just over a little bit of a month of extension. Thank you for that, Jay. All right, listen again, once again, if you're just joining the conversation, make sure that you do say hello so that, hey, Kara's birthday is tomorrow. All right, thank you for that one too. Kara is also Scott and Kathy's and their daughter, Kathy's daughter. So happy birthday to Kara. All right. And tomorrow's birthday is April 24th. That one's we got a couple of weeks out there. Yeah, you're right, Kathy Garlic. We'll talk about April 24th when we get closer to that. Listen, I want to get into our topic today because I think it's going to be kind of a fun conversation. And I've got a little bit of a bonus surprise today as we start talking about our topic, which is another time, another place. We're going to have a little bit of a fantasy conversation about if you could live in another time, what time would you choose? So I'm going to bring on a special guest co-host today to join me for this conversation. And it's one of our producers. It's Shalane Shepard. So I'm bringing her in now to the conversation. And there's Shalane. Hey, Shalane, can you hear us and can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
I hear us. I hear both of us. So welcome and thank you for joining me today as co-host. And kind of the reason that you and I talked about that I wanted to bring you on today, this topic was your idea.
It was.
You're the one who pitched the idea of doing this.
I did do that, yeah.
Yeah. So what made you think of this topic? What brought it to your attention to?
Because I'm an escapist and I like thinking about any time other than the one I am currently in. I do want to say two things before we get too deep into this. One, my computer's very low on memory, so I don't have the lovely comments up on Facebook. I'm just on the stage of streaming
That's
here.
fine.
So if someone else could be kind enough to take on the everybody drinks responsibility, I would appreciate that.
You can
Don't
just
wanna
say,
go by
and
the
you can
wayside.
say it out loud. Kathy Garlick already gave a toast and said, "Shalane, drink." So
There
you
you
know we can
God
do that
bless
right now.
you.
If you want to take
Yeah.
your cup and let you and I toast right now, we'll just there we go. All right.
And the other
Oh,
thing
and
is,
you've got the lovely latte mug. Coffee
I
Breaks
do
with
have
Steve
the latte mug. It does have tea in it, which is my
That's all
usual,
right.
but
That's all right. We allow that.
and the other piece is I did dress up for this in my usual Coffee Breaks with
This
Steve
is.
attire. This is my
Do you want to?
smoking jacket.
Okay.
There is attire underneath this. I just don't want.
Okay.
I want this to be PG, and please understand this is the over pajama attire, and this
Yeah.
is my Coffee Breaks with Steve outfit.
So, well, I like that because what you're doing is saying this is how you would normally come, and we are a come as you are program. So,
Who else is in pajamas?
not
Can't
me,
see,
but
I'm hoping that I have support.
But you can see my shirt, right? Which is
So I
I'm
think
going
you
to
need
zoom
to
in.
zoom
This
out and
is
show
not
a little more
I'll zoom out just
because
briefly
it
here.
looks very like a Bansky artsy.
Yeah, it's definitely a coffee. This is not pajamas. This is an actual shirt that I'm
That
wearing.
he wears out in
So-
public, ladies and gentlemen. Yep.
Well, in
Yep.
fact, Carol wants to go to the mall later today and asked if I wanted to go with her. She has not said yet, but change first. And in fact, I mentioned,
Does she make you change after you do your coffee
no,
break?
she actually doesn't. Now, she may not want to be seen with me at the mall, but anyway. All right, listen,
Anyway.
I want to get into this conversation because I think it's an interesting one from a couple of perspectives. You know, when you brought up this idea, and I do want you to, well, you mentioned you're an escapist, but when you were thinking of this, there's two ways that you can think of this another time, another
Always.
place, right? There is this concept of, like, if you're familiar with the movie Somewhere in Time, Christopher Reeves, and he ends up being able to trance himself into waking up in another time period, time traveling basically, or things like, you know, Back to the Future, any of those where you end up in another time period, but you're aware of everything that's going to be happening in the present time. And so that gives you some advantage in understanding things. And that's one way of looking at it. The other way is, and that's kind of how I interpreted this, Shalane, is if I had just lived in another time, what would I choose? And I didn't know which way you were thinking of it, if you had some perspective.
I think when I pitched the idea, I was thinking if you could have been born in another time, like there's so many of us who go, gosh, if I'd been born in blah, blah, blah time, that's really my time. And based on the style that you might dress in or the things that you appreciate, you know, the Roaring 20s or whatever it is, the Renaissance. So I was thinking more that, but I often think about the time travel conundrum.
Yeah.
And I have a lot to say on that. But do you have a time that you decided?
And there's the other thing with, you know, regardless is when you do think about it, even if you said, well, if I could have been born in another time, it's not time travel. We're still conscious of who we are and where we are now, right? And another time could also be another place. You mentioned like the Renaissance, and that maybe you would be in France, maybe you would be someplace else in that time.
Yeah, Yakima, Washington during the Renaissance is a little different
than,
than Paris during the Renaissance.
Yeah, but and that's obviously where you are is Yakima, Washington.
Obviously.
Lovely Yakima. But there is also the understanding that when we think about other time periods, mine actually, you asked mine, it's not necessarily an easy one because there are a lot of time periods I think would be interesting to live in and moments in history. And by the way, we do want to see comments in the chat. And I see Corey Ann has put some stuff up there, but other people, please share your own perspectives on this. I kind of think that I would want to live in colonial America at the time of the formation of this country in the 1770s, the American Revolution. And yes, did you have your hand raised?
Would you want to be the age you are now, or would you want to be younger and fight in the war, my friend?
Well, I think, And there are several things around that because, again, knowing what we know about it, even if you were born in that time, number one, there were things like a very severe smallpox epidemic that swept the country during that era, as well as other diseases.
And that vaccine was a little more intensive than the COVID one.
The way they did vaccines back then, they basically, they used a blade and put an incision. They would actually put live smallpox. They would actually extract smallpox.
That guy around. I hope nobody has eaten a big breakfast in preparation.
Yeah, I know. We're not going to get into that. But things like, you didn't have really, for the most part, there may have been a few places where the other thing is, were you wealthy or not wealthy? Carol and I were talking about this last night, is that any other time that you lived, your station in life could make a big difference. The other thing to think of is, you asked, would I want to be my age? To a great degree, unless you were fairly wealthy and had access to certain things and a little more cleanly environment, a little better food and that type of thing, you could very well, by my age, be dead. You think about, but you look at some of the people who lived during that time, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, others, lived to be a fairly ripe old age, but they also did have access to a lot of additional care and conveniences comparatively. I mean, even for them, it was limited. But I think I would want to be old enough not to necessarily be actively fighting in the war. But it would
be
cool.
a journalist.
I could be a journalist. That
would
be fun. I could be doing
printing the Liberty Papers.
I could be printing a print version of Coffee Breaks with Steve. It just wouldn't be a live broadcast. It would be a printed sheet.
Would they understand the fact that you changed breaks to breaks like a car
They would
break?
have no idea what I was talking about. It would probably be called Ye Olde
Coffee Rains with
Coffee
Steve.
Breaks.
Pull back on those reins. Take a sit down.
With Stephen.
Stephen.
But I mean, there's certain things that would just, I mean, even when we say, well, if I'm born in that era, I don't know about what we have now. Imagine 20 years from now, 50 years from now, people looking back on our time and saying, I wouldn't want to have lived then. They didn't have the things that we have now. I think back to before you were born, if you look back at the time period in which I grew up, back in the olden days.
It blows my mind that you grew up in the 50s and 60s because they do
and the 70s. And let's not forget
to me, but those seem a long time ago. And apologies to anyone in the comments who's like, "Hey, it just feels."
But I remember, as a child, thinking about the fact that my parents and grandparents lived through the Second World War, and when I was studying things like Pearl Harbor, oh my gosh, that was another time, another place. And now when we talk about things that I lived through as a child or things that we did, there are things about growing up in the 50s and the 60s that you kind of go, well, it would be great to still be able to do that. Like in the 60s, when we were and some of you are going to comment on this too, I know, but like our parents we'd get on our bikes, we'd be out playing and they would just say, we'll be home by dark, come home for lunch, right? We didn't have cell phones. Now, if you were going over to somebody's house, going over to a friend's house, mom knew the phone number at the friend's house and could call over there, or if something was going to change, we were supposed to check in. But we went all over the place all by ourselves. And it was not that big a deal. Now, as you guys were growing up, it's like, I want you within sight. Mm-hmm. To a certain degree, that was also an era where we were more what are called helicopter parents. We were probably overprotective about some things.
You'd seen the milk cartons by then.
We had seen the milk cartons. And the thing is that the idea of, stranger danger wasn't invented in the 80s or the 90s. We were always told, don't take candy from strangers, don't talk to strangers, don't get in a car with strangers if they say they need you to help look for the lost puppy, et cetera. But anyway, I'm seeing some interesting things here because it's interesting when you think about different times that you might have lived. But again, with that, I mentioned in colonial America, maybe even being present, maybe being a scribe in the room at Independence Hall where the Continental Congress was meeting. What would that have been like? Or to have been one of the delegates? What are those moments in history? Not just an era, but is there something about that? Was there a moment in history that attracts you? What is yours?
Oh, gosh. So it comes back to the same things you talked about of I'd want to be wealthy or else it's a no-go for me.
But not so wealthy that Like I wouldn't have wanted to have been royalty because that was very restrictive in many ways.
Well, I'm
It
not
depends,
sure.
I
I'm
guess.
not sure because I feel like the Royals back then, the Royals now is very restrictive. The Royals back then, they could do whatever they want. So potentially, but I've thought about. I love. For me, it's all about the costumes, right? So I love the Renaissance. Oh yeah, gender and race. I've thought about that. The
We
fact that
Carol and I
I
talked
wouldn't have
about
been able
that
to
too.
vote back then, but it's potential I could have been queen.
Yeah.
So, no voting rights, but potentially queen of the world. Moses, I think I'll stay here. I do love a good corset, a good crinoline. I just want to be able to flounce around in fun outfits and like learn to horseback ride and like do embroidery. I feel like those would be my jam. But yeah, there's a lot of other things that would not be so grand. Also the part where if I were born in those eras, fine, but if I were time traveling, I think I would really have a rough go at it because you think, oh gosh, $50 today could practically buy you a house back in such and such time.
Yeah.
But how would that money work? Because you have to have money from the day. I disagree with you, Brenda. I love a good course. But you'd have to have money that works in that day, which if you went and did an exchange, your $50 now becomes like 5 pence. And so money really doesn't have any wealth. Or if you had it like diamonds that were worth a lot today, you bring it back, it's still going to transfer to a lower amount, right? So it's not going to make you more wealthy than you are now. So really the only thing you have to peddle if you're a time traveler is knowledge. And I'm terrible about dates and figures and like the historical events and like, hey, this day in history, I should bet on that horse. I'm just not good at that. So I don't think that part would go well of me being any wealthier back then. In fact, I'd probably be much poorer because I don't have any good life skills. I know how to be on a computer. I'm not even good at embroidering. I mean, my knitters out there, you're ahead of me by far.
Sorry.
If you can darn a sock, you're good in my book.
Darn socks. I love my darn socks.
You do love your darn socks. Does mother
By the
darn
way,
your socks?
I'm not holding my foot up. No, I have enough socks that they don't get worn that frequently in a row. My socks today do go with my shirt. I'm not going to hold them up. But if you go to my Facebook page, I did post a picture of my socks in this full shirt. So you can, I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying you could see them there. Well, this idea of another time in another place, I think it is interesting. Among other things, I think when we talk about it, it does make us stop and consider. Yeah. Right? Because you do look at other times. I mean, we mentioned the smallpox epidemic in the 18th century. You think about the Spanish flu in the early 20th century. And it's just, those were things somebody mentioned on here. I think it was somebody mentioned earlier. I may have popped it up here and I'd have to go back and look at the comments. Was it Kirsten? Said something about the way they did surgery, no anesthesia. They didn't even wash their hands. And, there was just a lot.
Bite down on this stick. Good luck.
And we have had to deal with some things over this last year or so with the COVID virus. And yet think about as difficult as it's been, as much as we have struggled through some of the restrictions and the very fact that the way that information is spread now, again, the good and the bad, much quicker spread of information to help people know what's going on, but you still have to filter the information you're getting through different forms of media. Now we've got so many different sources of media that you have to filter it somehow and go, well, am I really getting all the facts that I need, or am I getting them in the right way? Right. And people even getting frustrated with all of the information coming out.
Well, even if this had happened 10, 15 years before it actually did, 2005, this had happened, it would have been a much different story because, I mean, the amount of connection we've had just sitting in my smoking jacket, don't smoke kids, but sitting here in my smoking jacket on my couch that I can connect with you. And yes, and Kirsten, in 2005, they would have thought you were a witch. Oh wait, no,
No,
back.
no, earlier.
But
They were called healers, but healers, any kind of person who could do alchemy or medicine was often suspect, right?
Yeah. So just that reality of recognizing, honestly, I'm glad that this happened when it did. And they'd been saying for how many years, yeah, we're really due for something like this. At least it did occur, as much as I would not say it's a good thing. It did occur when we had Netflix, when we have, we have so many conveniences that make it, we had groceries that can come to our door. 15, 20 years prior, it would have been much different.
Well, and even think about the fact it wasn't that long ago. I mean, we had cell phones 15 years ago, but we did not yet have smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
And you go back not much earlier than that. It hasn't been that many years back that we were really tethered specifically to. Now, we still would have had access to a lot of things within our homes, but yeah, I mean, there's just so much that that changes constantly. I mean, when we talk about another time, another place, it's like, well, yesterday compared to tomorrow sometimes, right? We're in this age where so much changes so quickly. But yeah, I think it still is an interesting conversation. What else comes to your mind? I'm seeing great things in the comments. You can go back and read this later, Shalane. You might want to respond to some of these later when you can look at them, but there are some cool things out there.
Oh, gosh. So, of course, I'd want to be there at certain points in history and see certain things happen.
Yeah.
But I do know that I want to have control over, like, I'd like to get out of here before stuff goes down. I want to get back to where I have safety here in 2021. So if I had full control over my time traveling, I'd probably want to go and visit a lot of different cultures, different times. I'd want to go and see ancient Egypt. I'd want to go and see, is this like a Jane Austen era? And meet some people who it would be really fun to just actually say, I got to meet them. Here's how they actually were. Here's what they're actually like. Gosh, I'd love to meet Charlotte Bronte.
But some of that could also be disillusioning. Sometimes the mysticism around certain people. Hey, I wanted to comment on Lila's comment. I'm not sure exactly if you were referring to a specific era or one of the earlier comments, Lila, but it is interesting sometimes to go back and look at how political news was shared and spread, because while the vehicles were different, the format might have been different, there was still a lot of, in any era, in any time period, politics was still a thing. And I don't know if it was so much that there was less political news or if it was just promoted differently, but politics has been a factor. I think we just weren't exposed to it in the same ways. Well, listen, we're getting close to the time to wrap this up. I'm leaving you on live here through the end of the program. And I want to encourage once again, if you are making comments, please continue to share your comments. You can stay on after we are finished live. And if you are tuning in later and watching the recorded version of this, you can still make comments. You can still respond to the comments out here, and I hope that you will. I wanted to talk just for a minute about what's going to be coming up next week. Next week's show is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting for a couple of reasons. One is I'm getting my second COVID shot next Thursday, which means there's a possibility that Saturday morning, if I'm having any kind of reaction to that vaccine, I might not be at my 100%, but we are still holding the show. I'm not going to cancel the show. And part of the reason is we have a special show next week. It's a special theme. Earth Day comes up on April 20th this year. And so our next Saturday's show is going to have an Earth Day theme. We're going to talk about conservation. We're going to talk about caring for our planet. We're going to talk about the things that Earth Day represents, but also things we can do. We have a special guest coming on. I have a lady by the name of Diana Roberts, who is with an organization called the Tri-Valley Conservancy here locally. But she has a lot of expertise about conservation, about care for our planet, and a lot that we can learn from and talk about. And what are some things that you can be doing, even during this time when things have been a little more closed down? Maybe there aren't some of the big gatherings on Earth Day, but what are things you can be doing for Earth Day, and what are things that you can be doing throughout the year, individually, as a family, as with your group, whatever that might be. So that's going to be a cool program next week. But anything else, Shalane, before we say goodbye and sign off the air
I
today?
just wanted to say that one of my favorite Earth Day activities is surreptitiously planting trees in my neighbor's yard in the night. So, if you want to set your
Wake up
clocks
in
to
the
2
morning.
a.m., join me for that.
Oh, wow. I really don't have anything to add to that I can think of, but I would just say, I want to encourage all of you to come back next week and be a part of that conversation. Invite your friends to come to that one. I think that it's going to be worthwhile. And Shalane, I want to thank you for joining. I also want to mention something. There's part of the reason that I wanted Shalane on here this week is that she and I is because of the way you look. She and I also are planning something that's going to come up a couple of months down the road. I'm going to tell you about it. These are still several weeks off, but I want to tell you about a couple of things that are going to be coming up soon that we're already planning for. One is they're both in June and they're back-to-back episodes. One is that my birthday this year falls on a Saturday, which means we'll be doing Coffee Breaks with Steve on my birthday. We're going to have a bit of a birthday party. It's going to be a slightly different format. You'll be hearing more about that. And then right after that, the following week is our 100th episode of Coffee Breaks with Steve. And so Shalane and I are talking about doing something that she will join me for one of those episodes that will be kind of fun. We're also going to be providing an opportunity associated with that 100th episode, a special contest. You'll notice we haven't been doing prize drawings every week, but we're going to have a special drawing, a special contest coming up. You'll hear more about soon.
Giving away that classic Coffee Breaks with Steve car.
No. But what it will be is that someone who wants to will have the opportunity to have their name drawn and be a guest co-host with me for that 100th episode. So you'll hear more about that. It's just kind of wanted to plant the seed for that. And we are a little bit past time today. I know that's usually not a huge deal, but I do want to let everybody get on with their day. And Jay, yes, I do still collect birthdays, especially milestone birthdays. And this year is one of those for me. So Shalane, I want to thank you especially for joining today and being a part of the live conversation. Absolutely drink. And I want to thank all of our, everybody for being here and being a part of what we do. And I just want to remind you, whether it's Earth Day or it's any other day, whether it's this week or any week, find a way to make a difference in your world this week. Thank you for being here. God bless you. Take care. Have a great week.
Bye, y'all.